This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
This Liberal government and their commissions kind of have a poor history with Canadians on their turnaround times. And, I think this commission brings up some parallels for me to immigration process and the ridiculous delays, which you're familiar with as a former minister there who actually created some of that mess with at the IRCC. So with that in mind, what specific and concrete steps will be taken to ensure that there is timely handling of complaints? It's easy to talk about it, but actually, how is that going to possibly occur?
Mr. Motz, I want to thank you for underlining the importance of having a transparent and efficient process. Under the current model that we have, which is the CCRC, we have made significant progress. The RCMP has made significant progress in reducing timelines and delays in the wake of some court decisions, as you know. What I can tell you is that this new commission, the PCRC, will place an emphasis on providing a robust, transparent review so that individuals who have concerns around the level of service or conduct exhibited by the RCMP and, for the first time, Mr. Motz, the CBSA, so that we can be sure that they are being treated in a way that is consistent, not only with dignity and respect and the Charter, but that there can be transparency and accountability about that, and the PCRC will help to achieve that.
Thank you, Minister. We've been down this road before on this particular concept. We hope we get it right this time. There's some merit to this. And I noticed that the Act provides the PCRC with some additional authority, specifically that initiating complaints and investigation into RCMP conduct when it's in the public interest to do so. Can you help us understand what that means? Like, isn't it all going to be in the public interest? And why do you emphasize that they'll only conduct those when it's in the public interest to do so? Because I would think if a member of the public has a complaint, it would be in the public interest.
I would tend to agree, and certainly as in my experience as somebody who has appeared in the criminal justice system, the public interest can be defined in a sufficiently broad way, and that is certainly the intent of this bill, which is to open up another avenue whereby an individual or a third party, or indeed at the own motion of the deputy heads or the chair of the commission, can look into any concerns around either the professional conduct of the RCMP and CBSA or the level of service that the individual involved may have received. And this is a watershed piece of legislation. I agree with you. We've seen this type of bill before. My commitment is to work with you and to work with all parliamentarians to see this version passed into law as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you, Minister. I have a background in professional standards in law enforcement, and part of the function that we had in municipal police services was to ensure that complaints were dealt with at all levels appropriately in a timely manner, and that complainants are always kept abreast of what was going on. Now, as I'm trying to understand the whole concept of the PCRC, what is going to change from the current civilian review process, and how is it going to be possible to have the capacity to deal with all complaints? And this is the part that the public needs to understand. There are still going to be requirements for the RCMP to investigate and the CBSA to investigate some of their own, what could be more minor issues, but where someone might have been inappropriate in comment or an attitude with the member. I would classify it more as a minor issue as opposed to a use of force or an infringement of someone's rights, for example. So how is the Commission possibly going to have the capacity to handle all complaints as it's been touted that they will?
You've asked two questions. I'll take the last part first and just say that we are committed to investing in this commission to a degree that is required to meet the standards that you have identified. And trust me when I tell you, I know that the RCMP and the CBSA are committed to same. But more importantly, this standalone legislation will represent a marked departure in a number of ways that will contribute to an enhanced, independent, external review of both the RCMP and, again, for the first time, the CBSA, by creating more transparency around timelines and turnarounds for the processing of complaints, by granting the Commission, the PCRC, the power to recommend that discipline proceedings be initiated, and that furthermore, that sanctions or disciplinary measures be imposed, and where that is not the case, the deputies' heads will be responsible for providing a report on that. Two other quick points, Mr. Motz, if I may. There will be more reporting on the work of the PCRC, and then finally, and importantly, the PCRC will have the mandate to collect and disaggregate race-based data, which is critically important to reduce the systemic racism and barriers
So
that
let me
many
ask you
Canadians
this
have
then,
experienced.
Minister. So let's play this out operationally. So you get dealt with either by CBSA or RCMP. It's the same commission.
30 seconds.
PCRC is going to be investigating this. How do you play that out operationally? So how does the PCRC get involved in a complaint that happens at the operational level? Will it be the same process that exists now, and the PCRC just provides oversight to that process and holds them accountable? Or will it be the PCRC is going to be the one who's going to begin that investigation?
I realize I'm very short on your allotment, and I'm happy to come back to it in a future round, but there will be a separate process set up, Mr. Motz, within the PCRC's mandate to hear and process these complaints as filed by anyone who submits them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the Minister and officials for being here on this important bill. Certainly, Conservatives, as you know, have supported it to committee, and withstanding any curveballs, sneaky amendments from any other party, we will likely be supporting this all the way. Certainly, we do recognize that when police and border officers, of course, wield significant power to enforce the law, they need an equivalent oversight body to ensure they're held accountable, as you've outlined in your remarks. So I just want to clarify for folks that may not understand what it is that we're all sitting here talking about. This is a new commission that sort of upgrades, you could say, the existing commission that oversees the RCMP complaints, but it also newly brings in the CBSA to that. Is that an accurate assessment in brief?
Yes, I mean, not just adding the CBSA, but adding authorities for both the RCMP and the CBSA.
And if someone were to make complaints, and I have asked this question, but just to clarify, they can make it at their local RCMP detachment, they can make it at a local port of entry, or they can contact via online to this commission when it's established. Is that accurate?
I think you're roughly correct, yes.
Okay. I did want to ask as well, if you'll allow me, considering complaints and things like that to bad actors. There, of course, have been, we've seen in the news that there are more PRC police stations operating. I'm wondering how Canadians, where they would make complaints regarding those bad actors.
You're referring to which, sorry, Ms. Dancho?
PRC police stations. We found out there's two more, likely.
Not the PCRC.
No,
you're referring
PRC, the illegally operating Chinese ones.
Ms. Dancho, these so-called police stations do not have any legal status in Canada. We're here talking about the Canadian law enforcement institutions in the RCMP and the CBSA, Ms. Dancho.
Right.
That's what this legislation touches on.
Would you like to take the opportunity to explain where people can make complaints about those?
In regards to which now? Are you back to...
If they're being harassed by those Chinese police stations, where could they make those complaints?
Well, first, we're here to talk about Bill C-20, as you know, Ms. Dancho, but naturally, if there's any concerns around the activities of these so-called police stations, we trust our law enforcement institutions to investigate, as they have in the past, as the RCMP continues to do.
They should call the RCMP.
They can call any level of police who have the jurisdiction in which those activities are reportedly being conducted.
Okay. Thank you very much. And again, I know it's not related to the bill, but I do think it's important. And I would like to see legislation come forward. I do believe that if you would bring forward the foreign agents registry, that the RCMP would be further empowered to take action and crack down and make arrests of those illegally operating police stations. Is that your understanding as well?
I wholeheartedly agree, Ms. Dancho. That's why I recently conducted and concluded a public consultation in which we've got a lot of good feedback, including online, and we hope to table something that will create this tool for the first time, a foreign agent registry, or what is the foreign influence registry regime.
Thank you. Would we see that
to
before,
further protect our institutions and our communities from foreign interference.
Before summer, you'll be tabling? Or?
We're working around the clock, Ms. Dancho. Sure. As soon as we table something, I will share it with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll wait with bated breath, Minister. I do have something regarding C-20 specifically. I recently met with the National Police Federation, as I know you have multiple times likely. They sort of raised the concern to me that this does not make the Commission fully independent from RCMP officers, that police themselves will continue to have to investigate their colleagues when complaints are made. Why was it not made more independent? They pointed out to me, and of course every province I believe has their own version, but one that folks have heard more often about is the Nova Scotia CERT, when lethal force is used, or I believe even in some cases if a police officer discharges a firearm, sort of a provincial, completely independent investigating agency is launched to look into that, so you don't have police officers sort of investigating themselves. So why was that model not adopted for this? This is a time of change, so just wondering why that wasn't.
I think it's a fair question, Ms. Dancho, and I think the best way for me to answer is for you to not see internal and/or external provincial disciplinary processes as being mutually exclusive to the work of the PCRC. What this creation of this commission does is it gives Canadians yet another avenue in which they can submit complaints to this commission, which will be made up of independent civilian members who will then look into the conduct and then make recommendations that could touch on discipline as well as on sanctions, and where sanctions are not imposed, to require the deputy heads to provide reasons as to why not. We think that this commission is compatible with those other processes which have been set up in at other levels of jurisdiction, and will certainly, so in the example of, let's say, a provincial police of jurisdiction, this is not in any way touching on that. This is solely focused on the RCMP and the CBSA. That's federal. The processes that you have described are much more in the vein of provincial jurisdiction.
Minister, I did want to follow up a little bit on the MPF questions about making it independent, and I appreciate what you said about how there's provincial jurisdiction issues, and but I didn't necessarily walk away from your answer with a very clear response of why it wasn't more independent. And the reason I want to harp on that is I think you would agree that there's been a bit of a morale issue amongst police forces in the country over the last number of years for a variety of reasons. And of course, over the last year, we've had, I think, almost 10 police officers pass away on the job through various circumstances. So deeply devastating in that regard. There's also movements calling to defund the police. Things like that are really, really tough on police officers that, as you know, put their lives on the line for us. I know those are very charged issues, but it does impact the morale. And my understanding from talking to police forces and members of the RCMP is that there are recruitment issues that are happening. There are not nearly enough people looking to join our RCMP forces, and it's a historic institution. It's deeply sad to see that. And I'm just wondering, this is an important bill. It's important. I'm glad you brought it forward, but it is ultimately about disciplinary action of police and officers through the complaints process. Again, that's important, as we've all agreed on, but I think that there should be a corresponding weight to uplifting police officers as well. I'm not convinced necessarily that's been an equal priority for you. Can you point to something that you may have announced to or done lately to improve morale with police in the RCMP and to improve retention and recruitment?
$390 million. We just announced in the last 2 weeks to help support police in their work to fight against gun crime and organized crime, Ms. Dancho. $450 million for the CBSA to help them fight crime at the border. 4 concrete agreements with the United States in a joint forum, which we convened a little more than a month ago. And my attendance, my personal attendance at all but one of the funerals that have occurred in the last time. So while yes, we are here to fight together. And I genuinely believe that the institutions in the RCMP and the CBSA are united in the cause to fight against racism. It is also important that we recognize that the members who serve in uniform are prepared and have made the ultimate sacrifice. And as the Minister of Public Safety,
May I ask,
I will defend that
just
work.
to follow up, and I appreciate that, and I do sincerely appreciate that you've been to the funerals. That's very important, particularly for you in your position to have gone. So thank you for that. But how many police officers will be hired from that, and how many border officers? As you know, the numbers that we have since your government formed office in 2015, there was only 25 more additional border agents hired, and yet it was a doubling of sort of middle management, which again, we respect our public servants, but from 2,000 to 4,000 CBSA employees, from what we understand at the middle manager level, and only about 25 more frontline officers. Is there a commitment in that funding for more border officers and police officers?
Ms. Dancho, I work very closely with the heads of both of these organizations, and we take the best advice on the resources that they need. What I think they would tell you is that in me, they have a tireless champion when it comes to giving them the resources that they need to do the job, both in terms of funding as well as legislative authorities. And I think this government's track record bears that out, as I've given very concrete examples.
Thank you. But just to be clear, then there is no requirement in the funding that you announced for hiring more police or more frontline border officers. Is that correct?
We identify strategic priorities. We also leave operational decisions to the police and to the CBSA to respect their independence. And I think it is important that we recognize collectively that the role of the elected government is to give those tools to police and the funding that they need, but then to trust the institutions to apportion those resources where they need it most in a way that is consistent with the priorities that are created by a dialogue that is ongoing.
I think Mr. Motz just has a concluding question, if he can fit that in.
Sure. Thank you very much.
45 seconds.
Thank you. Minister, as you know, CBSA does do contracting out for some of their services, for some of their security work to third parties. How do you envision the PCRC dealing with a third party with complaints that CBSA deals with? Like Garda, for example, does CBSA work, and they do, it's security, its responsibilities, and there's been some complaints and some issues with them in the past. How does PCRC fit into that scenario?
I am told by our officials that the mandate of the PCRC would extend to contract workers for the CBSA. I want to be sure about that, and certainly we will be precise in our answer to you, but as a matter of general principle, there will be some extension of the mandate to general contractors by the CBSA.
Thank you, Mr. Motz.